This video is brought to you by Captivating History. Culloden is a windswept stretch of moorland near Inverness in the Scottish Highlands. For many Scots, this was where the traditional Highland way of life died in 1746. For Britain, it symbolized an end to a decades-long struggle over the throne. It was the last pitched battle fought on British soil. Its echoes continued down to the present day. The Glorious Revolution of 1688. James II of England and 7th of Scotland was a Catholic monarch when the sovereign's religion mattered a great deal. He had secretly converted 20 years before becoming king. With the birth of a son in 1688, the door opened to the possibility of a Catholic dynasty. The male heir excluded James's Anglican-raised daughters, Mary and Anne. Earlier, James had prorogued Parliament and imposed a controversial decree which supported Catholics and Protestant dissenters. He favored Catholics in high-ranking military and governing positions. At the end of June 1688, 7 Anglican bishops were acquitted of seditious libel. They had refused to endorse the Declaration of Indulgence from the pulpit. The legislation and trial were seen as direct attacks on the State Church of England. There were fears of civil war. Soon after, 7 Protestant nobles invited Mary's Dutch husband, William of Orange, to invade and take the throne. As both James's nephew and a Protestant, he had a substantial claim. William arrived on November 5th with an imposing fleet. Officers in James's army defected to William's cause. The Glorious Revolution had begun. By the end of December, James, his wife, and infant son were exiles in France, guests of his cousin, King Louis XIV. Special convention parliaments in England and Scotland declared that James had vacated the throne, and William and Mary were installed in the winter of 1689. A significant minority opposed this change because Parliament had defied King's divine right by creating a limited monarchy. Only God could give authority to a monarch. Over the next 57 years, these supporters, called Jacobites, fought to restore James and his Catholic heirs. James landed in Ireland with 6,000 French troops in March 1689. However, after William defeated him at the Battle of the Boyne the following July, he fled back to France. He remained there until he died in 1701. In Scotland, Viscount Dundee, or Bonnie Dundee, was raising a Highland force even as the new monarchs were affirmed. Although they emerged victorious at Killiecrankie in July 1689, Dundee and a third of his men were killed. By spring 1690, losing Irish support, dwindling clansmen numbers, and 2 decisive defeats caused the uprising to fall apart. William needed to redeploy British troops to fight in the 9 Years' War. To bring about a definitive end to the uprising, rebellious clan chiefs were offered a pardon and £12,000 reward if they pledged their allegiance. There would be severe reprisals for any who refused to comply by New Year's Day, 1692. After the chieftain of the MacDonalds of Glencoe missed the January 1st deadline, orders were given to put all under 70 to the sword. The Duke of Argyll's men, who had billeted with the clan for over a week, struck in the dead of night, killing 40. The February 1692 attack broke the sacred Highland code of hospitality. It is still remembered as one of the most notorious episodes in Scottish history. The uprising was over. The Second Rising, 1715. William was succeeded by his sister-in-law Anne in 1702. During her reign, the Acts of Union created Great Britain, with Scotland and England becoming one sovereign state. Despite 17 pregnancies, Anne died childless. The 1701 Act of Settlement had removed any chance of her Catholic half-brother James inheriting the throne. The closest Protestant heir was Anne's second cousin, George, the Elector of Hanover. Under George I, the monarch's powers became more limited as Britain transitioned to a prime minister-led government system. Soon after George came to the throne, the Whigs won an overwhelming victory in the general election. They supported constitutional monarchy and were the implacable enemies of the exiled Stuarts. Some of the defeated Tories were Jacobite sympathizers and sided with the next uprising. The 15, as the Second Jacobite Rebellion was called, was initially successful. Inverness, Aberdeen, and Dundee were captured. By October, the Earl of Mar, the Jacobite commander, had 20,000 men and controlled everything north of the Firth of Forth except Stirling Castle. Mar was a poor tactician, though. His hesitation led to an inconclusive outcome at the Battle of Sheriffmuir. Even though Mar outnumbered the government forces 3-1, his indecisiveness allowed the government side to withdraw, and both sides claimed victory. The November battle left the Jacobites demoralized. Mar's French and Spanish supporters withdrew. In late December, James Stuart, nicknamed the Pretender, arrived in Scotland with neither the money nor the arms to rescue the cause. Facing defeat, both James and Mar fled to France, and the rebellion collapsed. Similar efforts to rise up in England were quickly quashed. King George showed surprising leniency in victory, although there were executions and property seizures. After 25 years in France, the Stuarts were unceremoniously kicked out under a 1716 peace treaty with England. Pope Clement XI gave James an income and a palace in Rome, where he established a Jacobite court. A brief Spanish-backed uprising also failed when the badly equipped Jacobite army was easily defeated at Glenshiel in 1719. The Scots melted back into the Highlands, while the invading Spaniards surrendered to government forces. The 45. The last Jacobite rising is perhaps the most famous thanks to the romance surrounding Bonnie Prince Charlie, Charles Edward Stuart, or the Young Pretender. Born in Rome in 1720, Charles was charming, handsome, and determined to reclaim the British throne for his father, James. Arriving with only a dozen men in August 1745, Charles unfurled his father's standard at Glenfinnan in the Highlands. By mid-September, he had entered Edinburgh with 2,400 men and set up headquarters at Holyrood Palace. Facing him at the other end of the Royal Mile was the British-held Edinburgh Castle. On September 21st, the Jacobite army had its first victory at Prestonpans near Edinburgh. Buoyed by this success, the Prince's Council agreed to invade England. Charles assured them that English supporters would rally to the cause, and the French were en route to southern England. The Jacobite army marched into England in early November, capturing Carlisle, and then continuing on to Preston and Manchester. Even though they were crossing through areas considered friendly to the cause, neither the promised English support nor the French money appeared. Reaching Derby in early December, the council felt that they had gone too far and should turn back. The Jacobites were now outnumbered by government forces and in danger of having their retreat cut off. The decision not to press on to London created a split between Charles and his council. A Jacobite victory at Falkirk in mid-January 1746 was followed by an unsuccessful siege of Stirling Castle. Their numbers had been bolstered by Irish and French units, but an English naval blockade was cutting off supplies. There were few options left other than to stand and fight. William, the Duke of Cumberland, now commanded the government troops. He had a reputation for inflexibility and strict discipline. On April 16, 1746, the two sides met at Culloden. Charles's men were cold, hungry, and exhausted after marching all night in an abortive surprise attack on British troops celebrating Cumberland's 25th birthday. Hoping that Cumberland would attack first, Charles ignored the advice and fought on flat, boggy ground. Unable to see his position behind the lines, Charles put his men in the direct path of government firepower. Cumberland's men were well rested and had the advantage of the terrain. The Jacobites launched an uncoordinated attack under fierce musket fire and grapeshot. Some broke through the redcoat front line, but were quickly cut down by the second line of soldiers. Government troops then gave deadly pursuit to any survivors. The battle lasted barely an hour, but it was long enough to shatter the Stuart dream. The Jacobites suffered a bloody, decisive defeat with up to 2,000 casualties compared to the meager 300 dead and wounded on Cumberland's side. Cumberland ordered his troops to show no quarter as they hunted for surviving Jacobite soldiers. It earned the Duke the nickname Butcher Cumberland from both Highlanders and his Tory opponents in London. One of Charles's generals led a group to safety to continue the fight. However, Charles thought he had been betrayed and abandoned his men. He spent the next 5 months on the run in the Highlands with Cumberland's men hot on his heels. He was aided by locals who stayed true despite a £30,000 reward. Perhaps the most famous of these protectors was Flora MacDonald. She helped him escape to the Isle of Skye disguised as her maid. His romantic place in history and song as Bonnie Prince Charlie was forged. The reality, however, was different. The aftermath. Charles escaped to France and spent the rest of his life wandering around Europe trying unsuccessfully to reignite the Jacobite cause. He died in Rome in 1788, a bitter, disillusioned alcoholic. He had married but left behind only an illegitimate daughter. He was buried in St. Peter's Basilica next to his father, James Stuart, the Old Pretender. The Duke of Cumberland's brutal crackdown across the Highlands after Culloden forever damned his name in history. Having reached the heights of his military career with the suppression of the Jacobites, he turned to politics in later years and died of a stroke at 44. Culloden sounded the death knell for the traditional Highland clans. London saw them as a source of Stuart loyalty. Despite the 1707 Acts of Union, clan chieftains had continued to hold considerable judicial and military powers over their kinsmen. These powers were abolished in 1747. Other laws confiscated arms, banned the wearing of kilts and tartans, and required allegiance to the Hanoverian monarch. Rebellious chieftains had their estates confiscated, with the proceeds used to encourage trade and agriculture in Scotland. Thanks to the Acts of Union, Britain had become Europe's largest free trade area. Scots prospering from English trade and manufacturing wanted to maintain the status quo. Jacobite ambitions withered in favor of a more realistic profit. The division between those who had followed the Stuarts or the Hanoverians is often oversimplified as a struggle between Highlanders and Lowlanders, Catholic and Protestant, or Scots and English. However, there were Scottish and English Jacobite supporters. Many Jacobites were from the Lowlands, and most were Protestant. By 1745, fewer than 1% of Scots was Catholic. And thanks to the risings often during wider European wars, the movement also had international supporters. One has to wonder if it had all just been a romantic fever dream. To discover more about the fascinating history of Scotland, check out our book, Scottish History, a captivating guide to the history of Scotland. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. Also, grab your free mythology bundle ebook for free while still available. All links are in the description. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.